anything to update?
No, sorry, I was cut out. No, I was asking Mitch if he had anything. I know he was looking.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, he was and he may not got to it yet, but I haven't heard from him for a while. So I was just asking that he was going to look at that overview diagram, that ancient overview diagram. And I believe we also gave Jason that assignment last meetings.
I have not. I apologize. It's definitely on my to-do list. It's a little bit lower probably than you'd like, but it's on it. And I don't have any specific comments on the drawings you have. Thank you. I'm glad that you're making drawings, so that's good. Keep it up. I know I can be the cheerleader a little bit.
That's fair. That's fair. Okay. I know I've got a lot of comments from Andrew. Chris, did you have any comments yet on? I know you've been looking at them for a while. Have you been able to pull some comments together yet, or you're still looking at them?
I'm still working on it. I have some questions around just kind of like how do we dig deeper on some of the the specific chunks, but yeah, I haven't had a lot of time to kind of dig in more than that. I'm blocking off some time next week to do so.
Great. And Chris, the attention on the and you'll see it today on the sim. The attention is we will drill into each.
Yep.
As detailed diagrams, which is kind of the next, as you saw on my agenda, that was the next thing to focus on is to drill into each of at least those three apps.
Yep.
To get into more, and I'll give you an example of what I did for SIM, but I want to do it for threat intelligence as well. So that's how we'll get lower.
Yep. Awesome.
Okay. Stephen, did you have any other comments on the diagrams yet? I'm not sure I've got any input from you yet.
Nope, not a bit.
Not a bit. Okay, no problem. Just want to make sure everybody has a fair share. And we've exhausted Forrest this week because he did an awesome demo video yesterday. So I won't bother him today, unless he wants to speak.
I haven't had a chance to look at the latest. I saw the changes, and I'm sorry. I think I'm creating an echo, so I'll shut off in a second here. But I know I saw the changes that you made per my previous comments, and they all look good to me. So
okay, thank you.
So it looks like it's getting on track.
Thank you very much, Forrest. Appreciate it. Okay, so with that, let me show you guys the work I did on the sim. It's a first pass, and my first passes are what I'll call rough. But if you look at this diagram, what is that doing here? If you look at this diagram, can you guys see this diagram? It's also out in the GitHub.
I don't see it. It doesn't look like you're sharing anything.
You were not sharing.
Hold on. Yeah, I think I screwed up the sharing. I think you're right. Thank you. Let me fix that. Start sharing. There it is. Share that one. When I had to look for the record button, I had to turn off the share button. I don't know why that is, but hey. Now can you see?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
All good now.
Great. Thank you. So this one, I didn't quite draw on the C4 standard, so hopefully Mitch doesn't get on me too much.
Boo.
So, and that's because it's a work in progress, and I hadn't cleaned it up a bit. But what I did do was I started looking at all the different types of flows that come into a SIM, and we talked about how complex these things can be. But I want to list out. I'll kind of walk through all of this stuff, and I think this will also help us search for data flows and information that may come from other places that are relevant for the malware use case. So, at the bottom layer, good old most SIMs, right? A good old log managers, right? And so every log in the IT infrastructure, pretty much, will get fired into a SIM, right? Very basic security events that get mapped internally into a SIM database, and they're all proprietary in what their databases do. And basically those events are giving us information, raw information about some kind of security event, a login, right, or a network failure, or those kind of very raw, high numbers, a lot of data coming from everywhere in the IT infrastructure, from operating systems to the networks and so forth. So that's traditional. One set of things that comes in, and they come in up to the SIM. The other thing that comes in most SIMs is network data. Everything from threat information for IOCs to packet data, level data, to traffic analysis, and for looking at and looking at files for malware. And I guess it depends on the SIM, but they do get a lot of network type data. So I kind of put that vulnerabilities get put in here. Traffic analysis. Now I'll tell you, the vulnerability traffic analysis also applies to things like email systems and endpoints. So don't context this as just network, but this is the kind of data that we're getting from these kinds of IT infrastructure. I tried to put the types of data that we're getting on this side. So connections, what's connected to what, analysis of connections, what's an unusual connection, where the connections are coming from, data rates, a lot of this kind of stuff comes in. So I kind of put that here. So network information pipes in, security information pipes into a SIM, right? And I call that the raw information. Now, we do get network flows, packet flows, IP flows and things of that nature that come in as well. And that can get you up to the application layer to monitor packet information at that layer if you got it. It can do packet capture again for diagnosis and context and deeper look into the forensics of that. So that's also possible. There's some flows. Another thing that hits the SIM. And then the final thing that hits the SIM is what I call analytics. I don't know if that's the right word, but it's the word I had to create for this. And I see two types. They're kind of correlational, right? If A happens and B happens, then do C. There's a lot of those, just basic, you look at this, somebody logs on in two places in two different countries. That's just like a correlation saying that's weird, right? That doesn't seem right. So there's those kind. And then there's a lot of what we call time-based or behavioral analytics. A lot of times they're applications. Sometimes they're sitting inside the SIM. Sometimes they're outside the SIM. Sometimes they're even in, some of the things that are out here monitoring to network or system resources. But I think it's a box that can fit in many different places. But those analytics are really trying to take raw information, consolidate them into more of a summary of what's going on, and more pinpoint information, so you don't have to go through these thousands of different raw events and get analytics to tell you, something that's unusual or something that just doesn't make logical sense. So, I call those behavioral or time-based here. So those analytics also feed into SIMs, and they're also on top of SIMs, but they can be also outside the SIMs. All right, so this is the kind of, I don't know if you guys, this is what you were looking for, but it helped me a little bit in terms of, as we start analyzing, what flows around these security systems, even just for the malware events, we do want to look at, that kind of data and where it's coming from to figure out, what we want to do about, commonality, and if so, how, for some of this information. So let me stop there and see if there's any comments.
Couple small comments.
Yep.
I guess first thing off the bat, and the security data and network flows sections you've got seem to have some crossover in my mind, especially when you start talking about connections in the network information. Those would be, connections kind of are network flows in my mind, and a number of products using pretty interchangeably. Especially if you're talking about something like, I don't know, Brozy, something like that. I feel like those guys, in a way, it seems almost like some of this needs to flatten out to me, because the network flows, the network information, those are almost interchangeable to me. And I feel like from a SIM perspective, he's probably not necessarily going to care. I think you could probably say, there are some systems where network flows are going to head into your analytics, portion as well. So to me, those three sets of boxes are all really just, different sides of very similar coins. I would say that at some point it probably needs some sort of threat intelligence going into the SIM. I think that's a pretty common, hey, here's my matching pattern. Maybe the SIM is used as the correlation and matching engine.
Yeah, and I had that down here as security, the malware IOC detection, the threat analysis. Okay. In here. Yeah, absolutely correct. Yep. I'll add threat.
And some of those could even be, your threat intelligence could be based off of the log entries, not just network information, where if I've got, let's say, certain mutexes that I know things are going to use, that's really going to be coming off of my event logs or what have you. But it's all going to go into the SIM, right? And probably, there are all sorts of, ways you can do pattern matching stuff, but it's definitely an option.
Absolutely, Andrew. And that's why I tried to separate the two here, because you can, vulnerabilities, you always think of them as firewall, but you can have vulnerabilities on endpoints, right? You can have vulnerabilities in databases. So, all of these things can apply to any of these, right?
Right, right, and that's why I'm kind of thinking when I start thinking of, you know, what distinguishes, you know, this thing from this other thing, this box from this box, they all kind of start looking the same, and it starts looking a little more like a bus than a flow chart at that point to me. That if these things really are more peers, then, you know, maybe it's just a big stack of different colored boxes or something like that.
I see.
Honestly, I'm kind of thinking the same thing with analytics too, because then I started thinking, okay, what makes analytics different from your sim? And I started thinking of all the, you know, 3 years ago at Black Hat, you know, you couldn't,
Right.
you know, swing a cat around without hitting 5 new user behavior analytics products.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
And you know, then I'm like, okay, well, you know, maybe that sits on top of your sim, maybe it's a feed into the sim, but now the sim and the analytics start looking a little more like peers too, or maybe they have a similar role in the system, attached to that
What I'll
same
tell you
data
about
process.
analytics is the analytics will also be out here in these network devices, for example, right? And so,
Right, right.
you know, so and that's good because in a lot of the newest systems, what's really cool is a lot of the analytics that get pushed out of the sim into these environments, and it does significantly reduce the amount of data that gets flowing between these endpoints and any other system like a sim or a SOAR, right? So you're
Oh,
right.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And you know, I have a lot of experience with Bro and, you know, the product now known as Zeek. And you know, you look at a lot of the scripts that are run on the data capture device there, and they tend
Yes.
to look very analytics, time-based correlation. You
Yep.
know, and any one of these things can adopt certain roles. And that's why I'm really thinking like maybe instead of trying to um, concentrate so much on the arrows between the boxes, you know, maybe it's more like trying to define the role of this thing. And you know, yeah, your sim can fulfill an analytics role, your whatever can fulfill whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Mm-hmm.
that make what data can talk to them and port in a little easier, because I think when it comes down to it, when we define an ontology, it's probably going to be very, very role based as well. And part of me is kind of thinking something like the profiles that are used for common criteria, something like that. Sorry, that was a bunch of word diarrhea there.
No, Andrew, it's very, very, very helpful. Yeah, and I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Mark, since you'll be kind of driving the ontology. You know,
Yeah, I agree with all of it. I think that, you know, I've been thinking about it a lot, and it's a hard. I mean, it's an elephant, you know, and where to start eating it is a challenge. But I think, you know, the tenets of connect once, reuse everywhere. Everything's available to everybody. We've talked about on a previous call, you know, thinking about decomposing SOAR and differentiating between, you know, event publishing and consuming, you know, and I think breaking down SIM, excuse me, I think I said SOAR, SIM, thinking about data acquisition as just part of the open platform that needs to happen. But I think moving more towards just in time, you know, versus centralization of everything. There's a lot to it, but I agree, you know, the main thing I think I heard called out is up leveling this and, you know, not breaking down network that far. Like it's just network and keeping it higher level and agreeing on those terms is something we need to do.
Okay, so I'm open for suggestions. If you guys have any comments, if you could do me a favor and just put a issue against this picture out on the GitHub, so I can kind of take your collective knowledge and figure out how to move forward on it. And that makes you know, that gives us some level of progress on what you guys want to get to here. So I'll be happy to do that. Just do what you can to help feed in how you'd like to represent or what we'd like to represent, so that I can have a better idea how to attack it. If I could ask that.
May I ask a question?
Absolutely.
So first question would actually a couple questions, I guess. Two. I'll just keep it to two. First one, where does, you know, the OCA the relative OCA pieces fit with this picture. So, for example, is there something that stick shifter, where does that fit in with this, and so forth? And then the second question, and maybe it's more of a statement, which is, I think of normalization as a thing that has to happen either in the sim or before the sim. And I believe that the OCA, what we are offering the industry, is some aspect of normalization to try and give standardized structures to the kinds of information that you can feed a sim.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of more of a question, and that second part is a statement, but really you could think of it as a question, is like, do you agree with that?
Got it. Got it. So the first one of the first things, Mitch, on this chart, it's not represented is the actions out. This was just data flow in. I'm going to get to the actions next. When I do get to the actions, that's where things like the stick shifter will fit in, right? They don't really deal with events streaming into a sim. They're not translating them yet. It's not something it's doing. So, all these data flows that the sim's not involved with. It's going to be involved with the stick shifter. I mean, it's going to be involved with queries and responses from systems. And I'll get, when I get to that layer, when we do the actions, that's going to be the ontology, OpenC2 and stick shifter. The more the actions, I think, that side of it, than this.
So I do think there is some relevance, and I might answer a different way. I think that yes, like we should strive to define a standard that things publish their events in, and if a sim consumes that in Stix2, for example,
mm-hmm.
and that's the native event schema that things network publishes by, then you don't need stick shifter adapters to search that source using a standard formatted Stix2 query object. It's when I think stick shifter can come into play, and other things that we develop, they come into play when something is not normal, but there may be things and vendors that adopt whatever that normal is, and when they're plugged into the fabric or the overall architecture, we don't need those adapters. I mean, I think that's, I don't know if that answers the question, but I think stick shifter can fit sometimes, and it's an adapter.
It certainly is, Mark. I wouldn't disagree with that. The thing that I think about when I build these pictures and the amount of data that we're looking at and the amount of boxes is we're going to have to pick which one of these connections, right? Because there's hundreds of them, right? So we can't have all of them being, translated to a common information block, if you will. I'd love to, but I think one of the things I was thinking of, for example, here, this is standard syslog. Do we want to make standard syslog and map it into stick shifter? I don't think we do. We could. But it's a standard now. It's kind of, is that the biggest problem we have? Probably not. We've all kind of built adapters to deal, all of these sims have already built adapters to deal with this, so fine. But the other end is a lot of synergy that if we fix that would give us more bang for the buck on interconnection and connectivity. So part of my answer is once we step back a minute on the pictures we're drawing, we got to kind of figure out what do we want to focus on? Because there's so many lines with so many arrows with so many boxes, we can't do all of them.
Yeah,
that's where I was coming from. But intellectually, yeah, it would probably be very good to have some common flows. But again, this was just the event side. So I was thinking, well, the events kind of just flow the way they flow. You got net flow. I wouldn't touch that, right? You've got it's just the PCAP. I wouldn't touch that for now. And then you've got syslog. So okay. But I think it'll change when I show you the other end of it, which is the action side, which I think is something that we can do better job at. And it fits nicely in the ontology in OpenC2, where we do have, common commands. And that's what the ontology was all about, right? Let's do one declaration of isolate endpoint, not 50.
Mr. Warren, you just threw some phrases out there that I think are actually really useful. PCAP, for example. You could use those here in this picture because they're very concrete representations of, in fact, what you're trying to generalize.
Yep.
Packet capture. I'd actually use the phrase, put PCAP in that picture. That would be my suggestion.
Yep. Okay. Yep.
Yeah, and similarly, if there's anything else like I think some of the other things you had in here, I'd include those acronyms.
Okay.
I think that'd be useful. I haven't met you, Mr. Mastrangeli. I think I'm gonna. I hope I didn't slaughter that. Pardon me if I did.
Oh no, Mastrangely, but
Mastrangely.
yeah,
Thank you.
If you get a couple syllables in there, I'll respond.
Mastrangely. Very generous of you. Thank you. I wanted to highlight. You used the word normal, and I used the word normalize, and I wanted to be very clear about my use of the word because I wasn't quite sure that you used it in the same way I did. So what I meant by normalized is from a logging standpoint. Well, I come at it from this logging experience of like you're taking arbitrary text, which is, a syslog line. I mean, sort of pre-Ceph, pre the standardizations, old school syslog, and trying to parse that out and actually, basically structure it, creating structured data. And that's really what I meant by normalized. So that it, obviously, so when it's structured, obviously, processes can actually make sense of it because there's metadata associated with the structure and so on and so forth. Anyhow, I just want to be clear that that's what I meant by normalized and not necessarily normal versus abnormal. I wasn't sure if that's how you were using the word.
No, so I think I meant it in that if something is published in the normal schema, then it would not be necessary to normalize it or do the parsing or transformation. Something publishing in the agreed to schema, that decreases the overall workload of the system.
Understood. Okay. So I think we were then thinking alike there, which is,
yeah.
Is it structured? It's already been It's already been normalized. If it's already normal, it doesn't need that extra process to make it so. Cool.
Yeah. I mean, I think, I always get in the weeds on thinking vision type stuff, but 80% of analytics, the resources spent on analytics is used munging and cleaning data, preparing it for some simple math at the end of the day.
Right.
And, the ideal system, if the analytic at top wants something different, then I think the sensors start publishing in the formats that the analytic needs.
Right.
Ideally.
Yeah, and I see one of the great benefits of this organization, this group of people, is to basically aid in the act of cleanup, which is to find out what the normal form is and try and get as many people lined up on that form so that there's now semantics in there. That's my dream.
Totally agree. And if I may digress a tiny bit, I think that we've been talking about how do we work with the SCAP group? How do we work with what is it, IACD? How do we, these different projects, all of it. And, I think the important, letting everybody do their work, everybody has a domain expertise and a focus that's necessary for their products or their, whatever they're doing. But as the OCA and, the way I think of the intent of the ontology is to bring all those things under an umbrella, and where there is nuanced differences, in nomenclature or terminology or categories of topics, if we can try and line that up across these different groups, then, we have potentially a distributed system. I think that's the hard part, is the upfront design, the guidelines that the different things adhere to in order for it to all come together. I don't think we can do that and go real deep all the time into the different categories. I think, letting OpenC2 do their work, letting an SCAP group, maybe that's not right, but hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I just wanted to be clear on words. So thank you for that.
No, thanks for the questions. Do appreciate it. So again, I'm looking for input on this, and if anybody can come up with an idea of how we want to depict this. I agree this is the best way of depicting it. I do like Mitch's suggestion of, when I looked at the SIM, I can tell you exactly what the types of data and even the type of products that feed this data versus that data. They're different, and I know who they are, and I know what they do. Maybe I should also do that just to give you a more, real world. Oh, that map to this, that's what you're talking about. That may help as well, because there are places that, like Gigamon, for example, can give me flows. But by the way, Gigamon also gives me analytics on the network flow. So maybe I can help with some of the examples there. to give you guys an understanding of, from what I see today, how the systems feed into each other. And I think the idea is, back to Mitch's point, to detangle all of that, because what you'll see is a stack of things that are only pointed and aimed at a very specific SIM. It may work for more than one SIM, maybe not. It definitely won't work with the SOAR. It definitely won't work with threat intelligence. They have a whole different set of things to cobble together all these boxes to feed in information. And that's, that's the detangling, the thing you were talking about, Mitch, is trying to get that cleaned up a bit so we can then separate these things, let one talk to many, right? Because this is a depiction of one talking to a very specific system. All right. So yeah, look for any other input you guys have specifically on how you think I can depict this better. I wasn't sure. That's why I didn't do C4 diagrams, because that didn't do it. Now I've learned this doesn't do it either, so I need to find something else. But I do think it gives us some good information, right, in terms of the types of data that is flowing around, and all of this is relevant to use case one malware, right? And as I said, I could even, with some of the comments I've received, I can even put in here a parallel flow from threat intelligence systems, right? And things that are identifying IOCs. That's kind of coming in here also, feeding in information about known malware into the SIM. It's not anything that's in your current network. It's just data feeds of the latest security intelligence information. And it's very relevant. Okay, so looking for input there for any of you all that want to play along. The next thing I wanted to show you guys was I did have a discussion here. Here it is. Da-da-da. This is probably a crappy projection. Hold on a second. What I did here, can you guys read this? Is this terrible? Do full screen.
That's better than the email that we started with.
Yeah, that email was the worst I could possibly do. So anything I did was improving. So here's what I put here. I went through our SIM at IBM, and I looked at the types of things that you integrated with other endpoint products, for example. And I also looked at email products. And what I looked at was the types of actions that were happening between them. And I thought this was interesting, and I think this will be relevant to our ontology or even the OpenC2 stuff. But I saw a lot of different things that happen. And if we looked at the ontology, I first two things from the current ontology, which was isolate endpoint and something else. That was it. We have all these other things that happen as actions between the SIM and endpoint. I would argue you could put SOAR here as well, completely different system. The same kinds of things could happen. So I just point that out as we start thinking about the ontology, right? If we're going to standardize on things, and some of this is queries and some of these are responses, but these are the kinds of data exchange that are going on between the SIM and our SIM and an endpoint solution. Similarly, I looked at how we integrate with email solution systems, and you get slightly different data, but I think it's all relevant to the ontology and the OpenC2 stuff on type of the data that's being exchanged and reported directly from these solutions to the SIM. Again, it's a partial list. I'm looking for any more input from folks. I think, again, the input here will be I want to put this into a document, and then as we do the ontology, I think we'll identify the top hitters and maybe model those and start there as a suggestion. But this is I just thought I'd give you guys an example of, breaking the SIM case down a little bit. What happens in terms of, if you're in the SIM seat as an analyst, what can you do from an actions point of view? And I think this is very much where things like the ontology, OpenC2, and also stick shifter play. They play in all this because it's pushing the other. All these queries, for example, when we do a query for a process search, that could end up definitely being a stick shifter. And probably, as a matter of fact, I think we have examples that it is. Right? Anytime you're going to go device queries, that's going to flow over stick shifter. Right? So a lot of these are going to flow over through via the ontology, sometimes via stick shifter, down to the actual either the endpoint itself or the endpoint solutions, like an endpoint vendor product, either one. Okay, let me stop there. Any comments?
Comment is that I think it only flows over stick shifter if the device control being queried doesn't support a sticks2 query.
Okay.
Right. So
either the device or the endpoint solution, like your McAfee endpoint.
Right. Or some other sensor.
Yeah, absolutely. If we don't need to do it, we wouldn't do it. But I know in today's case, we'll have to map to the proprietary local APIs that exist in the endpoint solutions and the ML solutions for today.
Hey, this is Adam. I think I have a question.
Sure.
And it's really related to the talk that Forrest gave the other day. I think that was just a couple of days ago, right? It's all blending together. The
I think it was
ontology
yesterday, I
talk.
believe it. I think it was yesterday.
Yesterday. Okay. But there you go. So, and I know that we're working on, I think the name is changing, right, to Open Security Ontology. In terms of the interfaces and all of that. And we have Stick Shifter, which helps to normalize some of the, I think, normalize some of the payload data. When I look at these two lists of things, I guess, right, like process search or hash search or device query, at what level, and again, keeping the ontology discussion in mind that Forrest gave yesterday, are we going to, at some point, have to look into how sticks, either sticks or stick shifter, probably sticks.
Probably sticks. Yep.
Actually forms or conforms, I guess maybe is a different word, to an ontological model, like a knowledge model that people can relate to, that actually has meaning, that relates all the way back up to the middle and upper level ontologies.
That's a good question, Adam. And it was a question that I brought up to the Sticks Technical Committee about 2 years ago. And there were a number of people in the audiences, like Sean Riley, Darklight, and others who were in favor of that. But the general consensus was that the answer to that question was no. At the time. That doesn't mean that we can somehow try to go back and look at it and see what applies where. But there was a decision that, and I asked a question because there was a heated debate about the meaning of something and definition of something. I'm like, well, if we put this together in a logical taxonomy and blah blah blah, and it was kind of shot down. So we decided didn't want to go that way for whatever reason. So now we can go back and look at it and see. And so, how we could map the different concepts, like, you have different objects in sticks, right? And you have different relationships between them and all that type of thing. So it's generally structured in a way that it's close to a taxonomy and an ontology, but it wasn't developed in what you really could consider a logical construct of relationships, such that it would be easy to make that transition, but we could still probably do it. I don't know if that answer helped at all, but I don't think that there had been any plans to organize it according to ontology originally, and so we'll have to go back if we want to figure out how to map it effectively.
Okay, yeah, that helps me quite a bit. A follow-on question. I'm a little ignorant when it comes to stick shifter, and I think, or at least I'm being told on the back channel here, Bill is telling me that JK mentioned at some point that on one of the OCA Slack channels somewhere that there's some kind of video on stick shifter and how all that works.
It's on
and
the
then I seen,
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So I also seem to have some recollection that there was going to be like a mini tutorial or something like that, but I could be wrong.
And there's also open office hours that Rose runs once a month. If you keep an eye out for them, they talk about sticks all the time in there.
Perfect. Okay.
Yep. So right. choose your venue.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think I have some homework to do.
Yeah.
And thanks again, Forrest.
Yep.
Okay, so again, I'm asking for input on this. So, those of you with endpoint solutions, like you, Mark, you have endpoint solution, and anybody that has an email solution, just take a look at this kind of list. And if you think about how your solutions integrate with any other products, it's SIM, SOAR, or Threat Intelligence, just capture, if you could, things like what I've got here, so we can kind of understand the communications and data flow between them. Because again, that's a precursor, I think, for the next piece of work we're going to do on ontologies. We got to be aware of all these things so we can understand what we're dealing with here and how we want to approach these. Because I think that's going to, if we do this right, then we can make this a lot easier for things to report out their information in a consistent format, such that the SIM, the sewer threat intelligence, and all these other systems can act on it appropriately. So anyway, I'm looking for that as input. So I did look probably through about 8 or 9 different solutions just to get this flavor of list, because different systems, obviously different types of solutions are going to have different strengths and different list of things they do. But I at least want to get a candidate list of these kinds of things. I'll probably do the same for the SOAR, and we should probably do the same with threat intelligence. But I'm thinking if we just proceed with use case 1 and looking at all the different things that we can do to the endpoint solution, the email solutions, which was the if you remember our diagram, those are the top end, and then the bottom end was threat intelligence, SOAR, and SIM. My intention was this: if we laid that all out and just captured this, we would have the data we needed then to make the next step and try and lay out an approach to draft the entire in the OpenC2 type work, so we can start establishing some consistent communications across the different systems. So that was the intention. And we'd populate it with things that are actionable. And I wanted to do that because then it'll give us ability to demo it and prototype it and show it. So we can show the OCA architecture and how it maps to things, to do things better that you're doing today, and then enable you to do more tomorrow, kind of thing. Okay, so that's all the homework I had done for this meeting up to this point. Any other questions or comments about this before we turn to the next topic? Okay, sounds like we don't. Okay, Mark, I was going to give you some time. I know that we've kind of merged the technical committee work into here. I know we haven't kicked that off yet, but do you have some thoughts that you want to leave the group with? I'm hoping we can get to that topic the next, at least put it on half the agenda for our meeting, is to talk about the technical committee and the next steps and how we get set up for doing whatever work the technical committee thinks we need to do on top of this.
Yeah, I think that I'm working on a draft right now with one of my engineers who's doing a lot of the writing and validation of kind of the samples and things like that to merge OpenC2 into the ontology with some other topics and use cases, file submission to a sandbox, things like that. Kind of a broad spectrum of examples. And I think it'd be, maybe schedule a date that we can review that. I'd also love to have a follow-up with you, Forrest. Maybe others would be interested as well. But I think, continuing on that great presentation that you gave on ontology and giving us some guidance, I think, to start really defining it and drafting it.
And the use cases and stuff that we're developing are going to be very helpful. That's usually the first step when we do the process. I don't know if you noticed on the kind of six-step process I talked about. So between all the use cases that we're working on here and a lot of the terms and definitions that we've already been touring with as kind of a first iteration, I think we can make some pretty good progress on that. And I'm also going to contact, I'm not going to have time today probably, but tomorrow I'm going to contact some folks at a company called Precisely, who did a demo for us on with some stuff, like identifying malicious behavior, with some IP data and stuff like that, using a knowledge graph approach. And so I'll try to set that up for us. And it won't match our use case exactly. I don't want to make them do a tailored use case that they haven't prepped already, that might burn time for something that they're not going to necessarily make money off of in the near future. But I think that they'd probably be happy to do a demo for us, considering the audience that they'd be able to advertise their wares to.
That would be great for us. Yeah, that would be excellent.
Okay.
And just so you guys know, I did post Forrest's webinar recording out into the OCA YouTube channel. So if you missed it, or you want to go back, it's out there.
And I think after we put together the Precisely demo, I'm gonna, see if people think that it might be useful if I would, if I do it a little bit more tailored. I realize it wasn't completely tailored to cybersecurity yet, but if I do that same presentation with a bit more tailoring and then a demo that we might see, if people think that might be a useful workshop / tutorial for the borderless cyber thing, Dee, I don't know if you're tuning into this, if you think that might be a good idea. I'd be interested to get feedback on that too.
I do. I'll send it.
Okay.
It was terrific.
All right. Thanks.
Sorry, I muted myself. Yeah, so I can share real quickly kind of this document that I'm working on. Let me blow that up. But really just starting with OpenC2 and the work that was done on kind of the draft of the ontology, and then trying to extend what's there. I'll get this documentation done in the OCA Git for the ontology. I think if we're good to go, I'll go ahead and get the name changed on the documentation that's out there as well, and then we can get that PR submitted. But I think where I'm getting stuck, and I think for us, this is where some of what we were just talking about will help, is up leveling, kind of the top level things. And then I think we decide on a category of, somebody's technology category classifications. I think aligning to Gartner could make some strategic sense. Maybe we get their attention more if we use their nomenclature for different things like SIM, SOAR, ZTNA, whatever the thing of the day is. Or maybe there's something a little bit higher level that we agree on. And then, with that structure, continue the work that Russ, like the example you gave with SIM, the things we've been doing with posture, all that good work, we kind of bring it back. But I think we need to agree on the top level down, and I think working on the bottom up as we have, we got to agree on some things in order to bring it together. But once we have that, I think we can go pretty quickly, and I think we can start assigning different, parts of the, the knowledge structure, the ontology, and having different member organizations that have an expertise in one area or another. Just, bring to actions and notifications that your product supports today, and let's start there across a wide spectrum of things. So I'll keep working on this, and then I'll get something published that folks can review and give feedback on. But I don't know if I'm going in too much detail here or not. I'm just missing the high level, I think.
What's helpful, Mark, as you're going through, if you can put the definitions with the terms, and also helpful the source where you got the definition from.
Okay.
As you're going along and you're finding these terms and stuff, if you can capture those, that's helpful. Mostly the definition. Now, the source is nice if you can keep track there. It's always nice to maintain provenance. But if you can at least get some definition, a draft. It doesn't have to be like that you don't know if it's the authoritative, but something to start with. That'll give us something to start with. Do you want to set up a time like next week to have a discussion while we're on the call now, or?
Sure.
Fairly free on Wednesday. No, not Wednesday. Like Tuesday afternoon at 1 o'clock Eastern works for me.
That works for me as well.
Okay. Anybody else wants to join us?
Yeah, I can set up an invite and send it out, or Russ, I don't know if you want to send something to the whole architecture group.
Yeah, just set it out on the architecture distribution list.
Okay. Good deal. Thanks, Forrest.
Yep. Oh, there's a webinar on Monday too. Look at that.
So that's really all I had. We've got to have some working group calls to move the ontology forward. I think that's the challenge of OCA, tackling that.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, anybody have anything else? Otherwise, thanks everybody for attending and appreciate your input and feedback. Have a good day.
Thanks.
Thanks, you too.
Thanks,
Okay, goodbye.
folks.
Bye, everybody.